Okay, it's the top of the hour, so I'd like to open the meeting for the Nagog Hill Orchard Work Group for May 22nd. We have a quorum. Do we need to do roll? We don't need to do roll call because we don't have anybody on there, right? So, okay, so we have we're here. So the first item on the agenda is review and vote on the minutes of April 10th, 2024, and I owe Matthew a beer for doing these. So.
I had a little help from Google.
Any comments?
No.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
I make a motion to accept the minutes for, what was the date?
4/10/24.
4/10/2024.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And again, thank you, Matthew. That was a tough one. So next we have a presentation of Scott and Frank Matheson, and unfortunately they can't make it. They have a family obligation, but I'll fill you in and talk a little bit because I had a conversation with both of them. So I think we got left in a very difficult position with the town meeting vote, where we essentially have a very rundown orchard with very rundown buildings. To get up and running, in my estimation, it's going to cost more than anybody's going to want to put into rented land. The RFI showed us that. And the town somehow thinks that it's going to hold 53 acres and two barns and a house without ever putting any money into it. So it didn't seem realistic, but the Mathesons, for those of you who don't know, have been farming in Littleton, the same family, for longer than there's been a Littleton. That land was literally granted to them by the King of England. We were still a colony. They've been very successful at it. So I had a discussion with, I'm friendly with Scotty, and we had a discussion, and I asked him if he'd be interested and under what conditions. He said he would be interested. He'd prefer to purchase it, but he could talk rental. And a couple of things we talked about to keep in mind for future meetings are they would be more inclined to rent that land if the town were to take the trees out, which I think is about $100,000 to $200,000 investment. And I think Will made a point in somewhere along the line and said, look, we can charge them rent, or we can take it out and get better applicants in there. You know, I mean, and we can not charge them rent and get somebody who may not know how to do it, or we can take it out and have more applicants to come in. Matheson's interested in hay, some apples, and some potential vegetables. So they'll be in at a later date. They understand that it would have to go to what are we calling them? RFRs? RFPs now?
Yeah.
They understand it would have to go to an RFP, but they are potentially interested. One of the benefits, and one of the reasons I talked to Scotty, because they're in town, they've got equipment and a setup within driving distance of the orchard. The only other person, or Will, who I think is precluded from doing that, and his cousin Danny, who last I spoke to him, he had no interest in doing that. So I think you will probably hear from Scotty at a future meeting, and I think they'd like to make a presentation and have a discussion. I would suggest if we're going to go through a rental process, we have two things we need to address. I think the 100-year lease, and I know Amy, you wanted to say something about this, makes some sense. Because there's 30 years isn't a long time to make back your investment on what it's going to cost to get that orchard up and running. I was actually impressed that two guys in their 20s were interested in a 100-year lease. I think that says a lot for them. And we do have an issue where the assessor, it seems to still be under the impression that she's supposed to charge folks the tax rate for any leasing. I've sent her back an argument against that, and why she doesn't, I have not heard back, but I think we need to resolve those two issues. Could we do a 100-year lease? Because that might make it more worthwhile for people to consider leasing it. And we do, and if you lease it, are they going to get charged 61A rates and the building rates for the barn or things like that? So I would suggest that we do have a couple of things if we're going to explore leasing, that those are two things we need to address. Amy, I know you had some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so I think the first step we need to do is remove all the trees off the property, since they're all just dead anyways. But I don't know I think it's going to be more than $250,000, because it also needs to be destumped, and then we need to put like compost in all those divots. So I think it's going to cost much more than that. I think if anyone wants to lease it, they're going to want, the Mathesons are going to want the house and the barn. So we're talking about redoing the house at prevailing wage, which is going to cost a ton of money, and fixing up the barn, which is also going to cost a lot of money at prevailing wage. So I think we're going to need to talk about an override at some point in this process, once we kind of understand like what they're gonna want, what they're gonna need. We're gonna have to go out and soon get bids on getting this work done. It's gonna cost the town a lot of money.
So they're interested in, just to make sure I'm understanding, they're interested in doing hay or or apples.
So, and perhaps more in the future, they would prefer to buy it. So I do know they want to do hay, what they did talk about, and they're primarily interested in that large block of land, and I can't keep the road name straight. The one without either buildings on it, the larger block, they are interested in that. Scotty, and again, this is preliminary, just discussions between us at the picnic table on my porch. Putting a couple rows of apples in along the road, largely for the neighbors, but all for tree fruit. But he told me, Scott, he said, I can get a whole bin of apples delivered, perfect apples delivered to the farm stand for $200 from neighborhood orchard. Why would I grow them? He talked about maybe some vegetable beds up by the barn, some asparagus and that sort of thing. So there's some potential interest.
So, but is he only interested if he can get a 100-year lease?
Well, we'd have to, that's for further discussion. Originally, he was talking a 100-year lease, and then he said, well, I might be more open if the town took the trees out for him, because that's a large expense. So it's not complicated algebra. The more money he has to put into it, the more time he's going to want to hold on to the land to get a return on his investment.
And he wants to he's got a full setup here, but he wants the house for what purpose?
Well, he said if the house were for sale, he'd buy it largely for labor housing. There's a shortage of labor housing around here, and they do have labor that they bring in. But I don't think he's interested in the house for a lease.
Okay.
He would be interested in the upper barn for lease and potentially the lower barn. Though I was over, who are the people who bought the Morrison's house?
The Sullivans.
I was at the Sullivans and trying to pull out, which is right across from there. I would not want to have to back a hay truck into that barn. That's a tough road, but that's up to them. So I've told them, let me know and we'll set up another time for you to come in and talk about it. And again, he does know that we can't just do it with him. It's got to go to, it's got to go out to RFP, but he did want to talk to people. And the advantage I saw and why I approached him is, anybody else is going to have to truck their equipment in. He doesn't. With that said, I also have some neighbors aren't going to like the fact that we're pulling the trees out and it's going to be hay and might catch fire. And frankly, a lot of other BS I heard at the town meeting that we're going to have to deal with.
I think there's a precedence that's been set at 99 years within the Commonwealth.
I think you take 99.
I think we said 99. So just for some people, that's more common. I would prefer to go before we talk also about ripping out trees, which I do believe I'm in support of that. There's a function of ripping out the trees and stumping without having to remove the stump. So I would rather go to an RFP, see who's interested in a lease and see, because there may be an opportunity to grow within the lane of where the old trees are instead of having to de-stump it all. So I guess that's part of the future negotiations to see. Obviously, I believe we do have to take out the vast majority of the trees, but there's a different level of, as Amy said, if you have to stump them, you have to have soil to refill them and get them going again.
And that's the discussion point with them on hay, on whether they're willing to give up.
But if they hay, we'd need to stump that.
You would, correct, but there may be
Other
there may be
parts.
other people out there that may have a different use within the lanes.
Yeah, in my opinion, the two lowest cost uses of that would be hay or grazing livestock.
Yeah.
And the grazing livestock, you'd have to put in fencing, which does come at a cost as well.
And
That's not small.
Yeah, and then there'd be aesthetic issues, I guess, with that.
What's that?
Aesthetic issues with the fencing.
Honestly,
look,
if anybody's gonna run even an orchard or vegetable place, there's so many freaking deer up there. They're
Yeah, there's gonna have to be some fencing.
Fencing anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think we're all used to looking at
Can I
fencing.
ask how many trees are on the property?
Was it 58 on that?
5,000
5,500.
apple trees, 500 stone fruit.
That's
Oh, wow.
what there was,
Used to be,
yes.
yeah.
So over time, some have met their demise.
I was under the impression we had to get rid of the trees, or at least some of the trees anyway, because of the disease.
We should.
But see, that disease is not spreading because it only lives on viable, the blight only goes to other viable trees.
Well, unfortunately, we do have neighbors who have viable trees, the Sullivans. I went there. It's not commercial, but they have 8 trees. And from what I could see initially at this time of year, they were being affected by.
Well, they've been affected for years.
Right. And they still seem relatively viable, but when we get to the maintenance, one of the things,
But
So the-
that particular blight only lives on certain trees as well, so there's some that it
No,
doesn't.
there are multiple insect pests, you know, and diseases
According
that,
to UMass.
that come from these. There's a statute on the book for a commercial orchard. The Department of Ag can actually come in and force a neglected owner to clean out the trees when it's affecting a commercial orchard. I did it a few times when I ran that program, and it's more than just one blight, it's multiple insect and diseases. And, you know, the Sullivans have about 8 trees. It's not commercial, but at some point, the town has a responsibility not to create a nuisance for the neighbors, and we're past that. So, and I would suggest we discuss that under the maintenance contract. So
Yeah, so just to go back to he wants the house for labor housing.
if he can purchase
For
it, but we
sale.
can't sell it, so he doesn't want to rent it because there's too much money that has to go into fix
If
it.
we fixed it, if the town spent the money at prevailing wage to fix it, would he take it?
I think you'd have to discuss rates and that sort of
Yeah.
thing with him.
Mhm.
I mean, everybody needs labor housing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, at some point, the price will be right and he will take it, right?
Mhm.
If he even has to fix it.
oh yeah,
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
there's gonna be some price where he will take it, he will buy it, and he'll fix it up himself.
yeah, I mean, if we can sell it, he would buy it at a certain price. I mean, he would buy it tomorrow.
Right.
You know.
He would use it already, even if he didn't have the rest
If
of
he
it.
could buy it, and again, the price,
Yeah, yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
he would fix it up and use it for labor housing.
But I wanna go back to to Amy, your discussion about the override. I'm just, so we're assuming that the town would have to do all the work on the buildings if we leased it.
Mhm.
Which is, I think, a valid assumption. I'm just thinking through. So apart from taking the trees out,
And I don't know if that requires.
Right,
override.
but I'm just trying to think, like, what's the lowest bar? The lowest bar would be taking the trees out for hay,
Mhm.
fixing
Someone
the,
who's not interested in some of the barns, so you wouldn't have to fix them up.
well,
Someone
or
may
let's
just
say
be interested
fixing
in
up the
land.
upper barn, which is not in terrible shape.
Right.
At
Yeah, that's
prevailing
minimal
wage,
cost, I agree.
and selling the house.
Sure.
Right, that would be probably the lowest cost
Yep.
way to get and leasing the rest of the land. That would be the lowest cost way of having the town get out of this.
And you could sell the house and use the proceeds to dump it into the land
Yeah,
in the
but
barn.
I think, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we already have a developer circling, so we can sell it to him.
A developer?
Yeah, but I don't
No, I don't wanna, I mean,
think that's a conversation. No.
okay, so that's a different conversation. I would rather try to keep it, like, do something related to agriculture. Like, and selling it to a farmer for labor housing would be the perfect
Yeah, but
solution.
if he doesn't want to put the money.
If he
into
doesn't
it,
want to, yeah.
then
no,
we have to
yeah,
put the money into it.
I
And if the
understand.
town doesn't want to spend the money into it, then we have to sell
Right,
it.
okay. And then the conversation becomes, well, do you want to spend the money or do you want a developer to turn it into condos? And then that's a different conversation at town meeting.
Well, and, what are the mechanisms we have in order to enforce such a,
Historical preservation restriction, not, I mean, zoning and historical preservation restrictions are the mechanisms.
so I think what I'm hearing is like a multiple year process. If we were first to find out who's interested, find out what they're interested in, then do what they say they're interested in, and then find out whether we can sell, and then get the deed restriction at some point in that process, and then potentially sell it. I mean, that's
And we
a
still need to go
multiple-year
back to town
process,
meeting.
and I do think we need to come up with a shorter term set of, goals.
I think the streamline of
That
that
should
is
not
to go
include selling.
right to an RFP. We've already done it before, see what's out there in terms of leases, what they want, and then simultaneously go ahead and have one of those meetings with is it PC? To do-
That's priority planning
yeah,
commission, MAPC.
Yeah,
I would rather they run simultaneously. Seeing what the interest is, and then all from the town, but also see what the interest is from hopefully that consumer that would like to go ahead and potentially lease.
Yeah, so I guess the concern is if Scott Matheson has come forward and he has said, I want to hay it, then there's no point in having any community involvement or conversations because he's the only one that can viably manage the property at this point. Like he's the
Well,
only
you don't
one.
know that though. We haven't gone to an RFP. There could be people that
There could be other people.
that did not.
Yeah, I mean,
They're,
Mr.
right,
Matheson
we
didn't
didn't hear from
respond
them.
to our RFI,
Right.
and yet here he is, so theoretically, there could be others like him.
Can we talk about and back up and talk about that process in terms of how quickly, with your experience, Karen, do you think we could streamline an RFP to get that out? From a lease perspective.
Yeah, and I think,
So for the record, I think we've jumped ahead to agenda item 4,
Yeah.
which is fine.
it almost sounded to me like what we were talking about is more another RFI, but for leasing. Let's find out who's interested in leasing and under what circumstances. Because if we go out to bid for a lease, then I think we have to have a certain set of,
But you still have the people that are still waiting in the wings that are not gonna do the RFI and still waiting for the RFP, so we're wasting another 6 months.
I mean, potentially, you could call it wasting. I would say that folks who decide that they're not going to play the game by the rules,
There's no rule, you don't have to do an RFI.
there is within the industry, if you want to have any sway on the RFP, and if you want to, if you want to know what's happening and you want folks to understand that you're interested so that you can have a seat at the table, you respond to the RFI. I understand that, some folks think that holding their cards close to their vest or whatever is a better idea. And certainly that's one approach. And my industry is not farming, but in my industry, you do not fail to respond to an RFI because that's your chance to influence what happens with the RFP.
There are people who legitimately don't want to put their business plan out there unless they, with that said, I like the RFI because frankly, we put out RFPs for leases before and failed miserably. We learned a lot from the RFI did when we thought we could sell it. So I see some value in it.
If we wanted to do more than a 30-year lease, that's another town meeting vote.
I think selling the house is too, right? Still has to be just
Absolutely.
surplus property.
Okay,
Well,
but-
actually, not necessarily.
So how would this RFI be different from the one we just put out if we do another RFI?
Really wouldn't, what, except for the term.
I
I
think
mean,
it
what-
would be responding to the town meeting, the expressed desires at town meeting to try again.
So we would be saying this is specifically for a lease, this is potentially for 99 years. This does or doesn't include the house, for example. I'm trying
Yeah.
to figure out,
Right, no,
what do we gain by doing another RFI?
Right.
I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, it's a fair question. I'm not sure we gain anything by doing any of this. for
We've done it
instance.
3 times, right?
With you.
We've done it 3
I
times,
voted for the other guy.
right? And
Yes,
we had one response, it didn't work out.
yes.
Right? And so it just seems like wasting time and like a futile effort. The reality is the majority of the people who showed up wanted us to have the legal authority to sell the orchard and have an RFP for sale. Because putting the orchard in the hands of a farmer and letting them do what farmers know how to do, right, is really the best market mechanism for making that orchard thrive. Like what I don't understand is people don't like the Board of Selectmen running the orchard, but what they did is gave it right back to the Board of Select to manage, and they don't know how. So there's just like this, circular confusion.
I don't get it.
Sure,
I mean, it's a little bit like the whole popular vote versus electoral college. It didn't do Hillary Clinton any good in 2016. It didn't do us any good that we had the majority of people at town meeting either.
I have to say, a lot of people approached some of us individually after town meeting and said, oh, wow, we voted the wrong way. We didn't quite understand. And we've been doing this for 3 years, but a lot of townspeople just hopped on literally 2 weeks prior and didn't quite understand the ramifications of what we were trying to do. And several voiced the fact that if the vote were to be retaken, a whole bunch of people would have been all for selling. Because as Amy has said, your nostalgia cannot run a farm.
It doesn't.
And exactly giving it back to, and this is nothing against the current Board of Select, but it's exactly giving the power back to you.
Yeah, and they don't have the time, they don't have the resources and the capacity we've talked about 1,000 times. I think the additional issue is, we have a property that's deteriorating every day. And, you know, going, if like we have a lease and we say we want it for 100 years, we go back to town meeting. And let's say they don't want it because they really want it to be sold because they don't want to incur all the costs. Then we have to go back to town meeting again for an RP for a sale. Like it just kind of goes on. And
So what are you
on.
suggesting?
I think we just go right back to town meeting and ask for the permission to be able to sell the property,
I
which is
would
what the
agree with
majority
that.
of people want. And if the Mathesons are really interested in purchasing, that's awesome. They can apply. You know, and everyone across the road is gonna get hay, you know, because like we kind of have someone.
I wish I could say I respected the vote at town meeting. I don't. I think it was really short-sighted. Do feel like we need to honor it, though. I mean, we could have prevailed at town meeting, voted to sell it, and have them come back in September to bring it back and say no. Anyway, I'm not gonna argue that point too long.
That can still happen.
What's that?
That can still happen.
Right, so I'm not gonna argue it too long. I agree with you, it was a stupid vote. There's a lot of foolish comments about the myth of in perpetuity and trying to keep the apple blossoms going and all this other stuff. But if the vote was the vote.
Well, I think, it was so close. If there was a Littleton farmer who was interested and had the stated interest, and we had some, you know, purchase and sale or other document, a letter of intent, and we went to town meeting and said, we're gonna sell it now because we have done the research on how much it's gonna cost to not sell it. It's gonna cost, and even if we sell it, it's gonna cost $1 million. And if we don't sell it, it's gonna cost us 3 million in the next 3 years. And we can do that research. I'm sure we can come up with some legitimate prices. I think that vote would go the other way. And then maybe that is the right thing to do. And maybe we need to do ask for a special town meeting to get this going, like, because we cannot wait any longer. It's just costing us money.
Yeah, and I think, so just to kind of back it up a little bit, so this is an ad hoc committee.
Mhm.
So I feel like, and I know I'm jumping ahead, like, we should have that joint board of selectmen meeting, because I feel like they need to be giving us the direction. Like, it just seems, I don't know if it's like getting out of our lane to kind of make that decision.
Well, I mean, I think it's our responsibility to advise, and I think the Board of Selectmen has been very clear about taking our advice and like respecting our advice, and that's why they want to have this joint meeting. It's like, well,
Yeah, I was
what do
gonna
you want
say,
to
that
do?
brings
you
us
know?
around to 4C, right, discussion.
Yeah, and I have heard some comments attributed to select board members that, you know, we should just hire a farmer and let them run it, and, you know, it's not gonna work, you know?
Right, which is why
We need to
we need
advise
to
them.
all get together in the same room and talk about it together.
I think and I don't know how versed the other select members are in terms of the financial ramifications, just like what we just talked about a few minutes ago. This is what we're looking at. If we do X, this is how much it's gonna cost, and I think that those numbers speak volumes. So that if we could have that for the joint meeting and be like, take the trees out, or this happens.
Well, so removing the trees is a price that we've quantified, but I think fixing up the house is one that's just a vague, wavy thing. I don't know how to get a number on that.
We might want to get bids for the trees, because I mean, we took it out of the land vest appraisal and they didn't address the issue of stumping, and I assume it includes stumping, but.
Yeah, we should have something kind of like broken down.
Well, the fellow that did the work before, when we did the pruning and that, he's the one who did the Shirley orchard when they took all the trees out. The fellow that's already worked for us, for the committee.
Yeah, Groton's cleared out a couple orchards in the last couple of years too, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's people we can call. I mean, can we ask Ryan to put out a bid to get costs for that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's seeming more and more likely we're gonna need to do it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think you'd want to think of what fields you're gonna
Right,
do
we would have
before
to
that,
determine
because
how
that
many
top
and
field,
where.
I would break it
there's a lot
down
of
per
rock
field.
outcroppings. It's not gonna be great for hay.
Which one isn't gonna be great?
The top, the largest, where
The
the
one
most
up,
amount of
the
trees
one
are,
along.
where the buildings are falling down
yeah.
up in the field. So you've got a lot of outcroppings of rock
Mm.
up there. So-
but wouldn't we want to remove the trees because they're dead, because someone could plant something else
Maybe you
there?
don't have to stump them though. There may be someone, as I said, that can farm in between
In
those
between
lanes.
them.
I don't think so, but it's worth a shot. Matheson's did indicate that that was a field they wanted to pay.
Good.
So,
I'm not sure when they walked it though. Okay, well, you know.
I will.
Yeah.
Well, so how do we do, so let's, I mean, I think that would be a good next step is if we do want to get a bid for that, how do we determine what we want to remove? Do we ask the Mathesons what they want to keep as far as trees and which fields they want? Or do we just go and say, what would it cost to remove all the trees from each of the fields?
Yeah, I think
I would go
we can
all
parcel
of
it
them.
out, what it's gonna cost to remove all of them, but they can certainly go.
Right.
They're gonna give you a per acre price.
Yeah,
What you need to do is when it goes to bid, to ask them whether it does involve stumping. And can they grind it in place? Is it getting hauled off? These are all the conversations we had 2 years ago and a year ago.
Sam's got a bunch of free time now.
Yeah, Will, you look like you have something to say.
Just Vermont land clearing. He's done a number of orchards up in Vermont and he was working down on the Cape this winter. That's what he does is he's,
You take stumps and remove and do all that.
I think so, because he's turning the orchards into agricultural fields, so I think
Yeah.
he's pretty well versed in.
do we need to remove the wood?
Depends on what the use is, whether you're grinding in place or it has to get removed. And here again, it depends on what the future use is.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine they'll chip it, and that might be what they used to fill in the divots for now, so.
Well, I don't know if that's gonna be great for vegetables later on.
So if we were to remove the trees, but not grind them and just leave the stumps in place or leave them, or grind them down into chips and leave the chips in place.
When we got bids for pruning,
Mhm.
it was a huge difference between the low bid and the high bid. And what we had to drill down into is, did it include removal? Did it include all of that? At one point, we thought that we would just ourselves take all that brush and move it and burn it. And we tried that. And it was just too much. So I would go for a bid that's removal, everything, getting rid of everything,
Yeah.
just so we have the high number.
I think
And
we,
almost be
And then
down
we
from
can-
that.
yeah,
I think we
can
need
come
to
down
plan
from there.
on taking the stumps out, because, I mean, Sarah talked about the rock. The trees aren't where the rock are, the trees are where the soil are, and that's what people are gonna want.
Right.
And they're gonna want the flexibility not to, I mean, we can wait and see, or get two prices, but I think ultimately we wanna take those stumps out.
So I'm sure we could get like remove them and stump it, or, just stump it and chip it, right? We can get prices for those different things.
Yeah.
probably.
And they can break it up.
Yeah, and just because we were the initial folks on the group, when we went out to RFP to get quotes for pruning, we got quotes, like the people who did it, it was like maybe less than 30,000, but like the profession, like the people who had like lots of people, lots of gear and lots of trucks, like they were like $100,000.
Oh, they were more than that. Yeah.
And they were just pruning.
So.
I think tree removal is probably a little bit more straightforward than pruning.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a bulldozer, not, you don't need to know where to cut, you just hit it.
And they just did that
The
one
ground.
top big field.
But I still think we should go for the high number, so we know it shouldn't be more than this, as opposed to, we get a bid for 300,000 and then that doesn't include anything. I think we should just
Yeah, I agree.
get
I mean,
the
we can-
price for
yeah, we can do
everything.
that.
It would also guide us as to prioritizing what trees to take out, that you can budget for a certain amount, we can clear a certain number of acres, and it's cleared up and done, ready,
Ready
more
for
ready to
hay,
use.
yeah, like this field at least would be ready for hay.
Well, I mean, they're still gonna do more for hay, but that's the biggest hurdle. I mean, you're still gonna need to remove all that vegetation, replant.
And that would help speed up the timeline as well. For anybody who is looking to come in and
I think it shows a good, putting our best foot forward as far as coming into compliance with the APR. Where even if it's, 2 or 3 acres or something, but you have a viable crop that's growing, then.
Hypothetically, if you took the brothers that were gonna do the trees, were they doing those in pots or were they putting them in the
pots.
ground?
they're doing
They were in
pots.
pots.
So you wouldn't have to stump if you had a candidate like that. You can remove the trees, but you wouldn't have to stump.
But they were only interested in the purchase.
To do what? What would you be doing?
but now the fact that they know, that's what I'm curious, if all the people that had interest originally in the RFI, we have the opportunity to go back to all of those 15 or so and ask them, you've seen what the town vote is, what is your interest in potentially leasing? I think that's the first question for us to know. Are there some of the original candidates that now that they didn't get what they wanted first was to purchase, are they willing to lease? Just
And under what conditions?
just ask them. I think that we'd be doing a disservice by not going back to those 15, asking the same question.
But we do need to ask them the conditions, because
Sure.
I question the business capabilities of anybody who said, sure, we'll lease it, and we'll take on all the costs. I might come back and say, okay, you fix up the barn and you take the trees out and I'll take it on.
But I think you have people that are very vested, they've walked the property, they've walked the buildings, they know what they're getting into. To ask those 15, would you consider a lease and under what conditions?
Yeah, the other thing is we don't know what the rent would be for that property, which would be a factor in.
Yeah.
And so that will only really happen in negotiation. So how are they gonna know that until they get picked, right? Because there's so many different factors into what they would want and what they wouldn't want and what kind of thing we do. So it's
And
like,
we will need to settle that issue with the assessor before we go to these folks.
But if we settle that issue with the assessor, I think the rent is part of the negotiation.
Yeah, I agree
And
with
I
that.
think like we are flexible enough on that rent. We have not been getting rent on that house for 30 years. Or 25 or whatever. Like, the fact that we don't make, $1,900 a month or $2,000 a month on it for the next 30 years, that's not gonna break the budget of Littleton. Spending $10 million to fix up the orchard is gonna be a much harder price to pay. So
Yeah.
I think that is a negotiable item on that.
I would agree with that.
But to go back to I think, we're sort of still on the joint meeting. I think that finding the cost to remove the trees is great. I think a big cost is the house. And if we want to present a real scenario, what do we say? I wouldn't ask a contractor to give us a bid on fixing that up. We have no idea what anybody would be interested in doing with it.
But they may want to split it up into 2 or 3 units.
Right.
Bulldozer.
What's that?
They might bulldoze it. I mean, sure.
yeah, I mean, it would be cheaper for the town to knock it down.
I don't know, we've walked through that, and I think the bones of that house are still good. It's
Right.
cosmetically a bomb.
Yep.
But the bones are still really good on that house.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I
I
think
don't think
somebody,
it's a bulldozer house.
yeah, I don't either.
It depends on the buyer. They may have other uses for it that they can make more money off of. I don't think it's a function of the house being salvageable enough.
Yeah,
It's where can they make the most
The
money?
highest and best use would obviously be for a farmer.
Yeah.
So the reason that we wanted to bring the house into APR was because we didn't think that it was really possible to run a farm without a house. So. are
You can, it's
we-
just less likely. The barn we absolutely need with the APR.
Right, but I mean, we're talking about, well, if we sold the house, then we could, are we walking back from that position? Are we saying that that's still the case and we'd be hurting our chances of selling in the future or
I think-
leasing in the future because now the house is gone?
If we don't keep the house with the land, I think it becomes a less viable farm in the future.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay. I think
But we've
that's,
been put in a corner.
yeah, no, I think that's true too. My point is that we need to make sure that that's made clear in the joint meeting. So that doesn't get lost in the noise of, how much would it cost and lease, deed restrictions. It's gonna make all our future options narrower.
Yeah, but I think one of the many reasons why we went to the sale option is because we had this conversation so many times, starting in 2021, it's like, well, what do you do with the house? Do you make it multi-family? Do you make it for a single family? Do you make it worker housing? So in the town can't decide, right? The person who's farming makes that decision. So you're gonna guess about what some future tenant may do in the future. And we could be spending money on something they don't want that they are then gonna come ask us to undo because it is an asset of the town and they are not gonna do the work. Right?
But if we sell it, we don't do anything with it and we
Correct.
can't do anything with it and neither can anybody else who
Yeah.
farms that land.
Is it required to go to town meeting to sell the house, or is that?
You said you didn't think we had to?
My
No, it's
understanding
unrestricted.
is that the select board could make that determination.
Since it's not an APR,
Right.
it's under the care, custody, and control of the select board.
Yeah, it's unrestricted.
And I
It's
think
not under
that,
any restriction right now, right?
Right.
that's correct. It's just owned by the town.
And neither is the upper barn.
Yeah, and, I think if we wanted to do a 30-year lease, I think we could do that without town meeting as well.
I believe so, yeah.
So I think the only reason we go back to town meeting for a lease is to extend the term.
Yeah, and then just to kind of like streamline, it, like if we were gonna do an RFP, an RFP for lease, we would write it exclusively for Scott Matheson to streamline the process, right? If you wanted to have you basically write it to look like a.
Well, I mean,
We
that,
still need to go.
Yeah, no, I mean,
But we
de
would just
facto, yes.
craft it to be for
Legally,
him.
legally, no, but like, yeah, we can do that.
I mean, I brought Scott forward as a potentially viable candidate, not as, oh, it's gonna go to Scott.
yeah.
You know, I do think he's got a leg up on a lot of other folks in some ways, but you never know until you put it out there.
And there is the 15 other people that.
What's that?
There is the 15 other people that have replied to the RFI, that's our market research.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and they also,
crafting along the
yeah,
lines of that.
Is there a way that we can reach out to them prior to the meeting with the select board? And it has to be the same questions to all of those 15 to see if we get any feedback before that meeting?
Sure, I mean, we
Yeah,
can reach out to them. I mean, there's no reason, we're not under any restrictions about to talking to
Because
those
I think
people.
that would be really valuable.
You know, and I think at some point we should tell everybody who applied that, hey, these for now time, things have changed and it's not up for sale.
I mean, we could do it that way. We could reach out to everybody with an email, giving them an update, letting them know that, you know, if they are interested in a lease.
Yeah.
Since that's all that's within our control at the moment, they should get back to us.
Yeah, so anyone, any email that we have, I think that would be great. I'd like to put that as an action item if we
Okay.
can.
So are we still in discussion of the joint meeting? Do we have a date or?
Yeah, I mean,
It's next Tuesday.
anytime the select board is meeting, right, was potentially an option. Did our agenda already come out?
Yes, but we agreed that we couldn't do it on the next select board meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah. we
So-
might-
Does it make sense to have the select board attend our meeting as opposed to?
That was another,
Yeah, that was
we
another
talked about that.
thing
We
we
were gonna
talked
talk about the scheduling thing here, so.
To see what people's availability was and if anybody was
Yeah, if it's Tuesday. I
not gonna
can't,
be
'cause
here in the future
we
to
do
know that as
conservation
well,
every other Tuesday.
yeah,
membership wise.
So I won't be, I'm resigning now,
You resign.
so. Okay.
So, so next Tuesday is the select board meeting, and then our next one would be on the 6th,
6th.
or sorry, the 5th,
June 5th.
is that correct?
Yep.
But we could meet before then with the select board if people were willing,
And the select board is.
and the select board was. So I guess, you know, I don't know what the plan
Everybody
is.
pull out the calendars.
I don't know what the pleasure of the
28th
board is.
I think your next meeting is the 28th, isn't it?
Yeah,
Select board?
the select board meeting's the 28th.
Tuesday, the 28th.
Yeah.
But I think Matthew's right. I think we talked about it a little bit more, and the idea was that trying to fit this big of a discussion into the select board's everyday agenda is gonna be tough. So maybe we should set aside a special time and place to do that, whether that's at our meeting or whether we come up with an entirely different date.
So we could try to, we could ask the select board if Wednesday the 5th would work. That's one possibility.
I have a commitment.
Okay.
Would it
If
be-
June 12th would be a possibility, is that too far out?
How about next week? What
Um,
about the 29th? I just hate to keep pushing and pushing and just keep.
that would be 2 nights for the select board in a row, but that might be okay. I mean, it's okay with me. We can ask.
I can,
I think we just got on a much slower boat after town meeting, so I know folks are in a hurry, but I don't think a week or two is gonna make that much difference.
and we haven't heard from MJAR yet, have we?
No, I'll see Ashley next week and it's better in person,
so
so.
the 29th is not doable for me, but
Okay.
I'm probably not coming back to this committee. All support from the select board side of things.
Was that out loud? Was that out loud?
No. Didn't hear a thing.
The 30th? I mean, I'm available most of next week, except for Tuesday, and the Monday's Memorial Day, obviously. So if we want to do it next Thursday, we can ask the select board for that. I think we're gonna need to give them a couple dates, probably.
We can all do Thursday.
Thursday.
Yep.
And then after that, so you said, Will, you said the 5th was no good,
Not for me, no.
the 4th?
Like I have conservation.
Okay. 6th?
Yeah, 6, that's fine, I guess.
So
So May
30th,
30th is the first choice.
yeah.
We do have somebody with a hand up, and I'm not terribly inclined to take a bunch of comment tonight. I think we're just
Yeah.
public comment. I think, surprise, sorry. This is the first time we haven't done it, but tonight I think we just need to chart a course forward for this board. So, thank you.
So the first day would be May 30th, and the second choice would be
June 6th.
June 6th. And then if those two don't work, we'll have to go to the week of the 10th and we can talk about that. I can email this group and try to schedule something because that's a little bit further out. So hopefully the 30th or the 6th will work.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'll ask.
Okay, so we did recap of efforts, general discussion, joint meeting with select board.
Yeah, can we just go back over the joint meeting?
Sure.
So we're going to reach out, are we gonna talk to Ryan about starting to get a quote for the removal of the trees?
If we can, please.
I mean, I can definitely email him and ask him. Do you have any other contacts besides the Vermont land clearing?
I don't,
I've got one.
Okay, will
It
you,
worked for the committee before,
Okay,
so.
okay. if you'll let me know that. And then the other one was.
I would suggest to write that so you get it with stumps, without stumps, per acre. and, you
Yeah,
know.
I have those.
And if there's
yeah.
gonna be any differences, like it's wetter in the part below the house, if it's gonna be more.
Right, okay.
Do you have the notes from Joe Lady when we sent out the bid?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Because we can draft. off
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's a good
Do you
idea.
have that?
I don't, I'm sure, I mean,
I can get that for you.
if you have it handy, that'd be great. And then the other one was, we want to email the RFI respondents and ask them if they're still interested in a lease.
Yeah, I think that,
I can do that.
You can do that? Okay, Karen's gonna do that. So those are the two, I just want to make sure
No problem, sorry.
we've summarized those before we moved on.
Okay, anything else under agenda item 4? We kind of skipped ahead. No? All right, let's back up to agenda item 3, the town newsletter article. Jen, I know you had an interest in this.
I'm sorry.
There's a new town newsletter that's putting out.
I think that's coming out in June and I thought maybe we should kind of keep people up to date now that it's a little more of a hot button topic for most. So if we just put together any progress or anything like Amy was saying, okay, now we're here. So your vote, this is what is the result of that vote. And just kind of giving people an update.
So we can double check with Jim. I think the deadline is passed for the June 1st.
So when's the next one?
July
July's monthly,
1st, yeah.
July 1st?
So I think the due date is the 15th, so it'd be the 15th of June for July 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably better to get in the second issue after everybody knows it exists anyway. So.
Yeah. People are like, what?
And that's something where it seems like Amy and I do an awful lot of like timeline type stuff. So if you're willing, then we can work on that.
I mean, from what you've written, you could basically like double the size of the newsletter with what you've written so far. I
You
think
may
that would
be the
be,
newsletter.
I think that would be a really like a
here's
statement.
the contact that I have for one of the people, Robert.
Okay, oh, that's for not for
Yeah,
pruning, for
for-
stumping and
yeah.
tree removal, okay, thanks,
He's done work for the orchard in the town before, I just can't remember his last name.
great. Thank you.
Quotes, right? He's just gonna be able to give us like.
Well, I don't know what if it's gonna be more than what, $30,000,
Yeah.
so it's gonna be a
So I
regular,
think he's gonna have to call and sort of.
it's gonna
get
be the
wags
full
more
30B,
than-
yeah. Okay, it's
At
gonna be
this
the full
point.
process, which is gonna be time consuming, but we need to do it, I mean, we can't not do it, so,
Right.
yeah, okay.
It's just, we probably won't have that number.
Yeah, we probably won't
For
have
the
a
joint
number.
meeting.
Right,
That's my
fair
point.
enough.
But we can give them, you can give them the, at least a rough estimate we have from land vets.
Yeah,
And if anybody does bring up, oh, let's just hire somebody to run the orchard side, and because it has come up from what I've heard, I mean, it's gonna cost them $100,000 a year with benefits and everything else. If you can find somebody who knows something about, a tractor alone is gonna cost them $100,000. I mean, we're not, it's not a viable solution to hire somebody to run the orchard on the town level, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
I mean, it's $100,000 for one person. One person can't run an orchard.
Right.
Correct.
If you can find somebody who's
Right.
who can do that, because there's not a lot of who out there. All right, anything else on the newsletter?
Nope.
Okay, action items, orchard safety and maintenance, and that's Sarah. Sarah, before you jump in, I did want to, as I said, I visited the Sullivans. They've got about 8 trees that really are at risk. I would encourage you guys to consider that as part of the maintenance, is not putting the neighbors at risk from disease and pest, which frankly is what's happening now, so.
I met on May 8th, did a site walk with Steve Yarnley for the town. We came up with an immediate action list. There's 6 items. I shared it with Karen and Matthew on May 8th. And so we're just trying to figure out how it's gonna be financed. I could go through the action items. This is in addition to items that were outlined in January, that were marked urgent in terms of things that were supposed to get done, which did not get done.
do you have this
Um,
available for us to?
That's
consider
all
at
in
once?
the drive. Those are all the ones that,
Well, I know, but I think, aren't we gonna be voting on this? Like what we
so
wanna
we're
actually
voting
move forward
on
with?
this right now, I think, which is
But
the
you just said
immediate.
this includes something else, or did you not?
It's all the work that was supposed to be done last winter, like repairing some of the holes. So all of those were already submitted back in January. I have a copy of them, but
But is that there's more than this list?
This is immediate.
Okay, but, okay,
So there are other things that should be done that haven't been done, but I was asked to come up with an immediate plan. So this is the minimum of what needs to be done, but we still haven't secured the buildings that we were supposed to secure, which we set aside $5,000 last January. Those are things like repairing window panes. We got all the hazardous material out already.
That cold storage area in particular under the upper bond, it really needs better security. It's got like a dog chain on it. Last I was
No, they
there.
already worked on that.
What's that?
I think they already worked on that.
So DPW is not gonna have the bandwidth to do whatever it is our list is, so.
Yeah.
Once we agree on what the list is, town hall put it out for bid and we'll get somebody else to do the work. But we just have to finalize what we're asking town hall to bid out.
well, let's vote on this tonight, right? Let's get this in process right away.
Yeah, that's my point.
And
So-
then,
The immediate action items is not a lot of money.
no, I
So,
know,
and I've already talked to Steve Yarnley. So we need to secure the shed that's falling down, just in terms of the snow fence that the town already owns, just so people don't go in the structure anymore. So, and that's something I basically said, if you put the stuff there, we'll just go ahead and do it. So we just need a lot of no trespassing signs to get up on, some of the buildings. Structural supports, which is basically 2x4s to brace up the building. We already lost one side of the building right on Nagog Hill. Securing some of the doors, reinstalling the sawhorses that the town owns. That DPW just needs to drop the stuff off.
Yeah, DPW. can do
So
that one.
We can do it. All these things, I think we can do as committee members. I know Jen and I have already offered to do that, but I wanted to get this done before I got busy, and now I'm not having much time.
I would really encourage committee members, you already spend enough time here, I know you want to volunteer, but at some point the town has to take responsibility. They bought these buildings, they bought this land, and they gotta maintain it. You know, it's like doing your kids' homework for them, you know, it doesn't help.
Depends on what hour of the night it is.
What's that?
No, that way lies the abyss. Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is the challenge of, this is the reason why it should be sold to a competent farmer, is because the town doesn't even have the staff to do like the most minimal things that we've been asking for since probably 2001, 2021.
So I appreciate your willingness to go in there and do it, but I kind of agree with Brad, like, let's start formalizing this process and holding us responsible for what needs to be done for that property. It's not our job to fix it
Town
up.
bought the property and they've got a easy for 25 years and it's led to neglect. I think it's time they gotta come to the table. They bought it, they made a commitment, and that
I mean,
includes maintaining it.
If it's a half hour of putting snow fencing up, sure, but I mean, you know, you're talking about
We
like,
never always.
Yeah, no, it never is. but I mean, you're talking, it's always
But
longer.
so,
You're
all
saying,
these, so you're looking, so if we look at the top barn, we have holes that the animals are getting through that has to get patched last fall, last winter.
yeah,
There's window panes that are out
yeah,
that need to be done. There's more and more holes, so the animals are loving the buildings. So a lot of them just need patches, either inside, outside. So it does take a carpenter to do those
yeah,
things.
okay.
So I would think that in today's prevailing wages and that, you could do it for less than 20,000.
Okay.
Originally, I thought 10, but now that things keep getting pushed away, I think you could definitely try and find someone. And I think, you know, one carpenter could go in and just get it done easily within a week or two, or,
And that's number 4 that you were just talking about, in Lower Wooded Lot.
no, that's not even on this list.
Okay, so again,
So do we
town hall
vote,
can't put out a bid until we vote on what we want them to do. So
are we voting a budget first and then
No.
tasks, or
we are
tasks first?
voting
and
on
then-
tasks. What tasks do
so
we want done?
Those so back in, I think it was January, we all have access to the list of what needed to be done in terms of repairs. Filling holes south end of the lot in terms of drill holes in buildings. Some of these things we've done, we removed the park and rec boat, we've removed the oils.
So Sarah, is there anything on that list that's not on this one that perhaps we could add and then vote on
All the carpentry is not on this list.
that? So do we have a motion to add the carpentry on, is it just the upper barn?
No, it's a lower one too.
So do we have a motion maybe to add the carpentry in the upper and lower barn onto this list?
Yeah, that's fine.
I
Well,
would-
let's come up with a list and then do it all at once, I think. Like, are there other things on the January list that are more immediate?
No, the holes have gotten bigger
Oh.
and there's more holes.
Right, but I mean,
Besides the holes.
apart from the holes, are there other?
Not that I know of.
So why don't we do the structural issues with the barns in this list and vote to send that to town and say, we need these fixed immediately? Like, fine, bid, set it out to bid and let's go. Because I think that's the way to move forward with these things, how to get them fixed.
Okay.
Is that? Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll move that the working group recommends to the select board that we address this list of issues that Sarah's presented, as well as the structural patches and or repairs to the upper and lower barn.
I second it.
Any further discussion?
What about the house?
No,
No.
I didn't even. go
That's a
down
bulldozer.
there. I don't.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes.
So I'll put the list together.
Thank you, and I'll forward it to Ryan, along with that request for bids on the stones.
Do we have to make a motion to remove the trees after we get the,
Yeah, we want to recommend that the select board, puts a bid out for removing the trees. We probably should make a motion for that as well.
Can I add to that recommendation that we do bring to their attention the neighbors who have stone fruit and pome fruit
Yeah.
are really suffering from the neglect of the orchards?
so, let me say this. I would like to make a motion to remove the trees on the Nagog property and to remove the trees of the diseased trees on the neighbors and abutting properties.
Well, I think we can remove them all, but make them aware that right now that neglect is impacting on some neighbors.
Okay, I'm gonna say it again.
What's that?
I would like to make a motion to remove,
To support.
to support the removal of the trees on the Nagog Apple Orchard property and to make them aware that there's diseased trees on the neighbor's property
That are impacted.
that are impacted.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We're down to other business. Does anybody have any other business? Well, okay. So for me, I want to let you know I am resigning. I really appreciate working with everybody. But with the vote at town meeting, I think we're fundamentally going in the wrong direction. And while I'm happy to donate my time to the town, I'm not going to waste it. I think it's actually worse than a waste of time in going towards a lease. And frankly, those people who really want to go that way probably deserve somebody on this board who doesn't think that their desires are asinine. So
I appreciate all your help, and you have a wealth of just experience and information and knowledge, and it's gonna be impact, like definitely a bummer to see you go.
no, well, thank you. And we had our differences at times, but I don't often say this, but I think everybody on this group is on it for the right reason. And it's not ego, it's not another agenda. They just want to do what's right by the town. But from my perspective, I don't think we're going in a direction that's right by the town. So
But we're gonna continue to use you as a consultant.
you can still email me.
You're getting.
And I will talk to Ashley.
An unpaid consultant.
Yeah.
There will be text.
I mean, I have to give the salary I'm getting here.
Yeah, we're gonna double it. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry too. But I, what I brought to this board, in my estimation, was help with the RFI and the RFP. If we're not doing that, then I don't see that I am necessarily the right person to be filling this seat. I think Mark Rombacher indicated he would fill the others, would be willing to step in. We'll have to double check with him on that after he sees today's meeting, but he's got ever so slightly more agricultural, meaning a lot more agriculture experience than I do. So, and the institutional knowledge that will be helpful, I think, here.
Mhm.
And I can continue to support this from the select board side and, advise, and I'm happy
Your
to
knowledge
help
of
in any way I
RFIs and
can.
RSPs has been invaluable.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue to help, absolutely.
That would be great.
This is, I think a different skill set will probably serve the board better, this group better.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
really
you've been a
is.
real asset. So,
I stand on my statement earlier.
anybody else want to jump ship?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lease is just like the wrong direction for so many reasons. So I'm gonna have to like really think about it after the next Board of Select meeting, because like, I don't want to waste my time. I keep like going like, we had that conversation back in 2021. It's just like, I'm not gonna waste my volunteer time, like answering the same question 3 times at town meeting. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, it's just kind of ridiculous.
So you're still thinking of it?
I'm still thinking about it.
So we need a chair then. Anybody? I can't, I'm not gonna be able to do it.
No.
Okay.
We'll get it over on time.
I saw Sarah yesterday. She was hoping you'd resign too.
It's hard, we're all frustrated. I think we all walked out of town meeting shaking our heads like, it was so close. And I agree with everybody. It should be for sale. For least we're just barking up the wrong tree. But this group, and I'm sorry there's some people leaving, but this group has been involved for so long. So on the one hand, it's like, why are we sticking around? If somebody thinks they can do it better, then we should all go.
Yeah.
Right.
But so
I think that's where.
I'm kind of the feeling of we all go and a whole new board comes in.
There were a whole bunch of people thought they knew better than us. John Mitchell and those guys, let them get up there.
Yeah, and
So-
I mean, yeah, and just so, just to give something the board select to think about, if you guys are gonna do a lease, then, maybe you don't even need an ad hoc committee because you have past
Yeah.
RFPs, you know,
We
you
were on
don't,
the committee and they
like-
blew past us.
yeah, we,
So we had no input on the original lease.
And that
yeah.
wasn't the first time that happened.
Yeah, not the first time.
So-
And you don't like
We don't
need
wanna get
us
pulled the
anymore.
third
Like
time.
we fulfilled the mission of the committee. Like we did all the research, we made the recommendations. And you know, people complain that the board of selectmen don't always listen to committees. This time the public didn't listen to the committee, which I find interesting.
Well, public has a right to be wrong, but I don't have to be there to sit and watch it.
So,
Yeah, maybe, I mean, you're right, maybe after the select board meeting, if we go with a lease, that we don't need to, this group does not need to be there.
I mean,
I mean-
I would caution that if we go with a lease, is a big if. If we, I mean, we go out to bid for a lease and we get 0 viable bids because of the terms of the RFP, or we get 1 viable bid and it doesn't work out.
And that's what happened
Then,
with the
you know.
candidate we had, and that candidate spent $30,000 of their own money
On legal.
on legal fees and walked away because they could not be in agreement on the terms. So to your point, Karen, it may very well happen again.
Yeah, so I guess I see the hypocrisy and I can smell the hypocrisy in me saying this, but just because we're talking about a lease as the next step does not necessarily mean that that's the direction
Right.
that the select board is going in, right? The
I'm excited to
the
hear
market
what
is
the next
ultimately gonna
fif- what
determine the
the last
direction.
15 people from the RFI have to say. So I'm reserving judgment until we get feedback from those people. I would like to hold hope that there might be more than one person that might want to do something.
I do think it makes a big difference too if the towns willing to put the resources forward to remove some of the trees.
It'll make a difference.
It will make a
Yeah, it'll
difference.
difference, yeah.
Big
Yeah.
game changer.
I mean, Charlie made a go of it because Charlie came into a working orchard.
Sure.
Our biggest barrier to a lease is the investment you need to work just to grow something on there and the amount of time.
Yeah.
Anything the town can do to reduce that initial investment is gonna make it more viable.
Absolutely.
Still not the best use, but it'll be potentially viable.
yeah, it's also, we had so many great RFI
Right.
candidates who were gonna do a really wide diversity of things. They were
And
like,
purchasing.
yeah,
Yeah.
purchasing, they were super community focused. They were gonna, a lot of them were gonna like replant apple trees, like, there were so many amazing people who really want to be part of the community. And they spent a lot of time filling out these applications, coming to our meetings, joining on Zoom, asking questions, reading all the
Walking in the
materials,
rain.
walking the property, you know, like that.
Sending us
that's-
emails.
Sending us emails, like, you know, that's a waste of
Yes,
those
ma'am.
farmers' time.
Okay, so just,
Yeah,
so,
Can you say who she is?
Megan, right?
In your address, Megan.
At 6 Green Needles Road, Littleton. So when you were just talking about the 15 people that gave interest, is there, so, or is, earlier it had mentioned maybe supporting coming back to town meeting and maybe talking about some of those 15 you know, what they had planned. So is that no
So to be fair, of the
longer-
15, we identified 4 to 6, depending who you talk to, who we thought were actually viable based on what they submitted. All of those wanted to buy it.
Okay.
So I think it's really those half dozen people maybe who come back and say, I might lease it if you did A, B, and C.
Okay, but but like, so at the very beginning of the meeting, it was talked about, let's just come back to town meeting and try again. And maybe if it talks about like, these are what the people want to do with these are our 4 candidates and this is what they want to do with it. Maybe some of the people,
I
like,
think
is
that
that not
Coming
an
back,
option anymore?
well, coming back to town meeting was sort of in the context of, if the Mathesons wanted to buy it, we need to come back to town meeting to explain what we need to do in order to get it to
Okay.
that state. If the Mathesons are willing to lease it for 99 years or 30 years or whatever, then we don't need to go back to town meeting or, you know,
Well,
in some form. For 99 years, we do.
Yes.
It's a different vote, I guess.
it's a
We need
different
to
vote, but I was gonna say, I think there's a lot to be learned from how the planning board handled the MBTA vote, right? The first time they tried, it did not go through. They held public sessions, they were moderated. They were able to do a lot of public education with them. And I think that either the select board or the Orchard Working Group or somebody I think, that is worthwhile no matter what we end up doing, is helping people really understand
Yeah, I think that.
what
needs
the
to be-
future of the orchard is.
Yeah, I think that needs
Under
to be
different
done by a
scenarios.
paid consultant.
Yeah.
Right, the MA.
Yeah, I'm not gonna put the
Yeah.
time into that.
No.
I've already-
No, nor would I, no, I think,
Yeah.
I wouldn't ask you to. I wouldn't even suggest it, but I do think that that's, I do think that going back again makes sense. I think when the vote is that close and when the costs are this high, if we can do more public education and, we've seen in the past that it took, it can take a couple votes to get enough folks to understand the facts, to vote with the facts.
Yeah, and there are some people, frankly, just voted out of selfishness, but I do think there are some people who didn't understand it.
I do too, and I think there were a lot of people who couldn't be there. And if they could have been there, they would have voted for it, but maybe they'll know enough, maybe they'll decide they care enough to show up at the, to make room.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to imply that if you don't show up for town meeting, you don't care. I
No, we get it.
reject that
Yeah.
fallacy, but yeah.
Yes, sir. And then so far as since we're taking comment, if he's still there, it looks like he's fine. Yes, sir.
Rob Brown's 25 Juniper Road. I agree, and you started off the meeting saying that people came up after the vote. I'm certainly one of them. I could have easily gotten other people to come, and I know many, many people. Some were there and left and were appalled by the vote. But frankly, the time that you folks have put in and the fact that you're about to rightly say goodbye for all the reasons that you stated, that's a powerful statement that needs to be shared with the town. And I think you ought to be right back at the town meeting, pay the $10,000, get a special town meeting, do it quickly, or do your, PR education thing, and then come right back immediately. Because there are some people motivated that are gonna pack the house with regard to, and I'll ask people who I won't even know what their votes are, but I'll make it clear to them how insane it is with regard to the presentation that was made and the vote that ended, and then they can come, and if they wanna vote against it, they can vote against it. But my sense from the people I speak with is it's an overwhelming slam dunk. It's just the apathy and the lack of understanding contribute to.
And selfishness.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll give you that, but the fact that you folks have put in the time and made the presentation that you did that was beyond convincing and nostalgia or whatever it was that we heard, and then to have the vote be as close as it was, because it sure sounded like it was going to be a very, very lopsided vote, far from the vote that it was. I really think you've got, as you mentioned, the MDT, I think you've got that ability. And quite frankly, the alternative is disastrous. And the alternative about you folks departing and having a new group that's just gonna lengthen the future, et cetera. I'm glad Matheson, et cetera, is of interest, but I honestly think the town needs to be out of this as quickly as it can. I think you guys were that.
And Matheson's would prefer to purchase it.
And that's my point. I come right back with the exact same vote, do the education, do the exact same vote. But I've taken enough of your time. But I feel strongly that if you do that, if you need some show of force with regard to public meeting from a public session, education session, give us notice. Some of us, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Very, very late arriver, and now I'm here, and I'll bring in a bunch of people that I feel can get motivated quite quickly with regard to, we're not that stupid, but apparently we're not successful because.
As a committee,
we're
we did
ignorant.
say that we were gonna do an outreach, so I would still like to do one and see how that
And if we
goes.
publicize it in the town newsletter, we might that might be a big game changer in terms of attendance.
What would it take for a special town meeting?
How many votes?
Select board would have to support it and it would have to be,
Any signatures?
No, I think you can do it if the citizen petition, I think it's up to 50 signatures in a petition. If it's properly formatted, we'll incur and trigger a town meeting.
And what about the cost?
That is borne by the town. If it's properly created by the citizen petition, a town meeting must be taken, must be held.
below 5 figures.
It's like, yeah, I think 10 grand was the figure we heard last time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think just to your gentleman's point, it's like, you have three people who have varying degrees and various forms of farm experience. I don't know where you're gonna find that somewhere else in Littleton. You're not. And Sarah wrote all the grants to decrease the total cost of the taxpayer back in 1999. Like, she knows that property inside and out. Like, there are, like, this board has the people that this town needs. You're not gonna replicate it again.
So, Safraz, are you still there? He was on, then he left. I hadn't forgotten.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, man.
So I'll be brief. I missed few of the, I think, meetings. So what I'm hearing is that,
Safraz, if you could give us your name and address where you live.
yeah, my name is Sarfraz Ahmed. I live in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. And my question is, I actually missed a couple of meetings, so I think this summarizes what happened at the town meeting. I guess people voted out or towards leasing the land, right? The question is,
Yeah.
I know that if the APR land is leased, there are grants and all things like that. You cannot get the federal grants and all that. So the loans become difficult and all those things. Did the town consider that those things, like, APR land still remains APR, or whether they are considering splitting the APR as a sale and rest as a lease?
No, it all has to be, well, there's non-APR land there, and what we were focused on at town meeting was a sale of the APR land in the house and the upper barn.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I understand. So I think I was more interested in buying all, but like, let's say most of the applicants, I guess you were highlighting top 3, 4 or 8 were interested in buying all of them, all of the parcels. But what I'm trying to say is that if the town is leaning towards leasing, then can the APR be sold separately and the rest can be leased to the same party who's interested?
No, it's actually the exact opposite. We needed a town meeting vote to sell the APR property. The remainder of that property can be leased tomorrow if we wanted to, assuming we got R and all that.
Up to 30 years.
Yeah, for up to 30 years.
Okay. Well,
So basically, wherever the apple trees were, for the most part, that we were looking to sell, that's APR.
okay, I understand.
And I just have a question for you. Would you be interested in leasing? I don't remember your application offhand, the details.
Yeah, I would be. I need to see what lease entails.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was actually more. I was interested in buying APR in any case, whatever way it would have turned out. But because of the new outcome, I think we can talk about like what the lease requires, what are the restrictions, because it becomes difficult when the town is not relaxed. They don't relax the terms, and they are very strict on things, on the leasing. So it all depends how the lease turns out to be, or what the lease terms are.
Okay.
I understand 99 year is the most viable option, but I'm not sure if you are putting that on the table.
Is what is the most viable option?
So 99 years lease, right?
Yeah, we need to go to town meeting to get approval to have a 99-year lease if we're going to do that, which is a consideration.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good.
And again, as previously discussed, that would at least ensure you had more time to make back your return on investment.
Right.
So, and for the record, since I'm leaving and nobody cares, you were one of my top applicants.
Dropping the truth bomb. Gives us letters.
And Ben will be our chair, right?
Come on, Ben.
You can now partner with me. You're leaving the board. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Safraz. All right, any other business? So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
I'll move it.
All right. I assume everybody agrees. We can move on.
Hey, thank you for all your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.